Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon, those of you that made it, and those that are connected through the internet. Again, thank you. Today, we're studying the book of Numbers, which is the fourth book of the Torah or of the 5 books of Moses. And so, just to give you a background, remember that we just finished the book of Leviticus. And so what's going on? Remember that in Genesis, basically, we have the beginning of all things. We have the beginning of knowing God as creator. We have the beginning of creation. Then we have the beginning of humanity, creation of humanity. And then we know that Adam failed, and then Noah, and then finally God finds a righteous man like Abraham. And so from Abraham forward, we have his sons, which whom God made a covenant. And so that is the basis of all the things that's happening in the Torah. So in the book of, after Genesis, we go to the book of Shemot or Exodus, where God takes the people of Israel from Egypt, brings them to the Mount Sinai, makes a covenant with them, gives them the Torah, plus makes them a nation, makes them again a nation, brings them back to that honor of being a people. Because remember, they had been slaves for over 200 years. So while they're in the desert, besides giving the covenant, he also gives them what's called a code of Kedusha, or a code of holiness. Why? Because he gave them the instruction to build a tabernacle or Mishkan, which is a sacred space so that God can dwell among his people. But to be able to continue dwelling with his people, he has to give them instructions on how to keep that, maintain and sustain that place holy. So that's what the book of Leviticus is all about, holiness. But once all that is in place, so we have the people, we have the Torah, we have the tabernacle, we have the holiness, the code of holiness. Now God is ready to form an army. Why? Because every king has an army, and we know that from that moment on, they're going to start marching towards the promised land, and they know they're going to encounter nations, and probably there might be some war, or once they get into the land, they have to fight for the land. Okay, so what we have is that God is forming an army. So basically, that's the way the book of Numbers starts out, Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. Now, one thing we have to understand, that wilderness is not the same as desert. Okay, the desert is basically, we know what a desert is. There's nothing in a desert. Okay, there's no life, there's no inhabitants, there's nothing. It's just arid land. But in a wilderness, the difference from a desert and wilderness is that in the wilderness, there could be some small mountains or hills, there can be rocks, there can be maybe a few sources of water, there can be some shrubbery, things like that, but there's no inhabitants, there's no people. So that's the difference between a wilderness and a desert. So that's where they're at right now. So if you have your Bible with you, please go to Numbers chapter 1, verse 1, and we're going to be reading all the way to chapter 4, verse 20. And it says, so the Torah portion is called Bamidbar, which means in Hebrew, in the wilderness. And it says in verse 1, in the wilderness of Sinai, on the first day of the second month, in the second year from the exodus from the land of Egypt, Adonai spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting, saying, remember that Adonai is another way of saying God, or instead of using his proper name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, we call him Adonai. So this is in the second year. So they've already been 2 years in the wilderness since they came from Egypt. Remember, the first thing they had to do was build the tabernacle. And while all those things were happening, it took easily a year, and now everything's established. And so this is the second year of them being in the wilderness. Verse 2 says, do a head count. In the Hebrew says, lift up the heads of every individual. Do a head count of all the community of the children of Israel by their families and their ancestral house, with a total of every male one by one. You and Aaron are to muster by their divisions every son from 20 years and upward, available to serve in the army of Israel. So they're counting every single male that is 20 years and older. Okay, 20 years and older. And verse 5 says, these then are the names of the men who will assist you. So God is telling Moses and Aaron that they're to count all the men 20 years and older, but he's going to give them help. Why? Because there's a lot of people. So they're going to choose like a chief or a prince or a leader of every tribe. And since we have 12 tribes, there's going to be 12 leaders. I'm not going to go through all the names, just to, you can read that on your own. And so it says in verse 17 of chapter 1, so Moses and Aaron took these men designated by name. They assembled all the community on the first day of the second month. They declared their lineage according to their families, the households of their forefathers, with the number of the names of those 20 years old and upward being listed individually. Now, one thing that we need to notice is the way the people are divided is a tribe, families, and house of their fathers. So we have a tribe. And we know there are 12 of them because they are the sons of Jacob. Okay, so those are the original tribes. And so in the Hebrew is the word mate or shevet. Either one can be used to say tribe. Then you have them divided by families. And this is what's called mishpachot. Okay, so you have a tribe, which is everybody that belongs to the tribe. And then within those tribes, you have families. And then within those families, you have the father's house. Which is called Beit Avot. Okay. So you have the tribe, you have the families, and then within the families, you have the fathers. For example, like saying father, grandfather, great-grandfather. And so you go from the greatest, the biggest, to the smallest unit, which would be the father's house, which is basically the smallest unit of families. And it says, verse 19, Moses numbered Israel in the wilderness of Sinai, just as Adonai had commanded him. The sons of Reuben. So he starts counting with Reuben. Why? Because Reuben is the firstborn of Jacob. And again, I'm not going to read everything it says. If you can't sleep tonight, you can go over these names and practice them and read them. So he's going through the sons of Reuben. Then in verse 22, which total from the sons of Reuben is 46,500. Verse 22, from the sons of Simeon is a total of 59,300. From the sons of Gad, verse 24, they're going to be 45,650. Verse 26, from the sons of Judah is going to be a total of 74,600. Verse 28, from the sons of Issachar, there's going to be 54,400. Verse 30, from the sons of Zebulon, there's going to be 57,400. Verse 32, from the sons of Joseph, they divide them into both his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim is going to have 40,500. Verse 34, from the sons of Manasseh, 32,200. Verse 36, from the sons of Benjamin, 35,400. Verse 38, from the sons of Dan, 62,700. Verse 40, from the sons of Asher, 41,500. Verse 42, from the sons of Naphtali, 53,400. And it says in verse 44, these were the ones numbered. Moses, Aaron, and the princes of Israel counted them. Each of the 12 men represented his ancestral house. So all those counted from the children of Israel according to their ancestral houses from 20 years old up, all able to go out with the army in Israel, all those who were counted were a total of 603,550. So there's a total of 603,550 men, 20 years and older. Now you have to consider, If you have that amount of men, 20 years and older, you also have to understand that in Judaism, once they hit 18, they're expected to be married. Why? Because they have to start early to start a family. And you know, for those of you that have been in Israel or know some Jewish families, it's not one kid, it's not two kids. It's usually a dozen. Okay, so imagine if there's 603,550, each one with a wife, that's 1.2 million. And let's say each one has a kid. So basically, and we're not counting those that are much older. We're not counting people, the children that are the guys that are less than 20. So there's a lot of people. So truly there was at least I think 3 million people in the wilderness that came out of Egypt. They're not also counting the people that came with Israel. The other nations, remember there were Egyptians and other nations that united with Israel when they came out of Egypt. So these are not counted. So there's quite a few people there. But what happens? The only people that were not counted in this census were the Levites. So now this is what God is asking. Why? Because the Levites are not to serve in the army. Okay, so really this is the beginning of the IDF. Okay. No, it's okay. No, the foreigners were not counted. Only the children of Israel from each tribe. Okay, so basically this is the beginning of the IDF. Okay, the Israeli Defense Force. Verse 47 of chapter 1 says, the Levites, however, were not counted by the tribe of their ancestors. For Adonai told Moses, saying, definitely you are not to number the tribe of Levi, nor take the sum of them among the children of Israel. Instead, you are to appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony, over all its implements and all pertaining to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its utensils, tend to it, and camp around it. So the purpose of the Levites was completely different from the rest of the men that were counted, because their purpose and their function and their role is to serve in the tabernacle, to serve God as ministers. Verse 51, whenever the tabernacle sets out, the Levites are to dismantle it. And whenever the tabernacle is pitched, the Levites are to set it up. But the commoner, in other words, anyone that is not a Levite, who comes near to it must be put to death. So anyone that is not a Levite that approaches the tabernacle, it is death that ensues on them. Why? We have to remember that God has a protocol of holiness and of purity. So if you don't meet that protocol, you cannot approach the tabernacle. And the consequence is death. Why? Because he said so. He's the king. Because if you do that, it's what's called encroachment. You go into a place that you're not supposed to, that you don't have the authority, that you don't have the grade of holiness or purity to do that. That's why in the book of Leviticus, he gave us all the instructions on how to be in a state of holiness and purity. So verse 52, the children of Israel will encamp, each man with his own camp, each with his own standard, according to their own divisions. The Levites are to camp around the tabernacle of the testimony, so that there will be no wrath unleashed on the community of the children of Israel. So the Levites are to maintain care of the tabernacle of the testimony. So the children of Israel did all that Adonai commanded Moses, so they did. So what do we have? I'm going to erase this. So remember that the important thing here is the tabernacle or the Mishkan. So if this is the tabernacle, and remember that the opening, it always looked towards the east. So this is east. This is south. This is north. This is west. I finally learned my directions. So we have here the Mishkan, okay, where the tabernacle. And the Levites are to encamp around the tabernacle. So here we have Levites. Why? Because they're going to serve as a buffer between the sacred space, the holy space, and the rest of the tribes, because the tribes are going to be around the Levites. In the center is always the tabernacle. God is always the center of all things. Okay, so that's one of the main things that he's teaching us. He is the center of our life. Okay, and then he gives us order. He gives us a role, a function, and a purpose. Every single individual has a function, a role, and a purpose. So that is why he's saying all these things to the children of Israel. Chapter 2. Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, saying, let each man encamp under his own standard among the banners of their ancestral house at an appropriate distance around the tent of meeting. It so happens I was reading, the commentary says that where the tribes were around the tabernacles is the same distance that Jews are allowed to walk from their house to the synagogue, the maximum, which is, I think, is 2,000 cubits or feet. The units are always different than what I can understand, but the distance was always the same. Like, you know, in Israel, there's certain rules, even here in the States. If you go to New York, the synagogues are in a place where everybody can walk a distance from their homes to the synagogue. So all the families around that neighborhood, around that synagogue, they can walk more than a certain distance. That's their understanding of the law. So the same thing here. There was a distance between the tribes and the tabernacle. And it says, verse 3, those camping on the east. So now we have, those are going to encamp around the tabernacle on the east side of the tabernacle. Toward the sunrise will be the standard of Judah. So in the east, we're going to have Judah. So this is going to be the camp of Judah. And with Judah, there's going to be the tribe of Issachar and then Zebulun. Issachar, then Zebulun. Okay. And among them three, it was a total of 186,400 men to the east. Okay. And there it says here, verse 9 of chapter 2, all those numbered to Judah's camp by their divisions are 186,400. They are to advance first. So anytime that they were moving out, the first to go out was the tribe of Judah. They were the leaders. And why? Because Judah is where the kingship comes. They're the leaders of Israel. It's from where Messiah comes, the leader. Okay. And then we have verse 10, the standard of the camp of Reuben shall be on the south. So now we have Reuben is going to be on the south. And with Reuben, we're going to have Simeon and the tribe of Gad. And they're going to be a total of 151,450. And then again, like I was saying last night, okay, Pastor, what's the big deal of knowing where everybody was and all these numbers? And all this? Again, it's about order. God is teaching us order the same way that he was teaching his people order, because they are his army. And why do you think he's called Adonai Tzevaot? Hashem, the God of hosts. Host means army. So even if you never served in the army or in the military, you are part of the military of God. He sees us as his soldiers, as those fighting for the kingdom, defending the name and honor of our king. So we have Reuben, Simeon, and Gad for a total of 151,450. And there says, verse 16, it says, all those numbered to the camp of Reuben are 151,450. They are to set out second. So first, the camp of Judah is the first, then goes Reuben. So once marching orders were given, The first people to go out, the first camp was Judah, with Issachar and Zebulun. Then came the camp of Reuben, with Simeon and Gad. Okay, and so the same way that they're set up around the tabernacle is the same way they marched out. And once they got to a place that God said, okay, we're staying here, we're going to camp here, that's the same way they had to set up again. They could not change it. Yeah, and Diane reminded me that this happened 42 times. Okay, 42 times in 40 years. And there was one day where God said, okay, take everything down, let's move. And the same day he said, okay, let's pitch tent. Can you imagine in one day doing all this? 3 million people. Do you know, do you have to have order? Absolutely. If not, Moses would have been more loco than what he was already. Was all these people there. Verse 17, then the tent of meeting will move out with the camp of the Levites, which is in the middle of the camps, just as they were in camp, each person in his own place under his own appropriate standard. So we have camp of Judah, camp of Reuben, and then the Levites with the tabernacle and all the furnishings and all the stuff, then they move out. Okay. Verse 18, on the west, we're going to have the camp of Ephraim. So on the west, we have Ephraim with Manasseh and Benjamin. And this is going to be a total of 108,100 men or families or people. Remember again that this is just counting the men. So it's a lot more than that, but they are all responsible for all their families, all their things, all their stuff to moving out. And then we have, so they're moving out third. Verse 24, all those numbered to the camp of Ephraim are 108,100 by their divisions. They are to advance third. So Ephraim, the camp of Ephraim is the third one to move. Verse 25, the standard of the camp of Dan is going to be on the north. So now we have Dan on the north, and with Dan we have Asher and Naphtali. And they have a total of 157,600 men. And they're number 4. They're the last ones to move out. So everybody has a position, everybody has a place, everybody has a function, everybody has a purpose, everybody has a role. So once they start moving, imagine 3 million people, plus all the animals, plus all the other stuff they have to carry. And imagine if you're the leader. So that's why you had tribal leaders, you had family leaders, and then you had household leaders. Because make sure, Johnny, come on, you gotta move. Honey, sweetie, pick up your dolls. We had a baby, you know, so it's a lot of people moving out. So it says, verse 32, chapter 2, these are the numbers of the children of Israel in accordance with their ancestral households. All those counted according to the divisions are 603,550. Remember that this is only the men, 20 years and older. However, the Levites were not counted among the children of Israel, just as Adonai commanded Moses. So the children of Israel acted in accordance with all that Adonai had commanded Moses. Thus they camped by their standards and set out each man according to their families and their ancestral houses. Now everybody had a standard. I don't know if you ever seen, remember the breastplate that the high priest had, those colors? Well, they think that every banner for every tribe was the same color according to the breastplate, and some of them had designs. And if you look it up, you'll see that certain things, like for example, Judah, usually it's a lion. That's why it's called the Lion of Judah. I think Levi is a knife. which is appropriate. If they were the ones in the temple, in the tabernacle, doing the offerings, they had to cut up all the animals that were offered, things like that. So every banner is a representation of each tribe. Chapter 3. These are the generations of Aaron and Moses, current at the time Adonai spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. These are the names of Aaron's sons: Nadab, the firstborn, Abihu, Eleazar, and Itamar. These are the names of the sons of Aaron, the anointed priest, whom he consecrated to be priest. But Nadab and Abihu died before Adonai for offering unauthorized fire before Adonai in the Sinai wilderness. They had no children. So the first two sons of Aaron died because they did something which they were not commanded to do. So if you want to go back, I think it's in Leviticus chapter 10, you'll read about that. But they died was not having any children. Verse 4. I'm sorry, so Eleazar and Ithamar served as Kohanim, or as priests, under Aaron their father. So the last two were priests along with Aaron. Verse 5, then Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, gather the tribe of Levi near and appoint them to attend to Aaron the Cohen, the priest. They are to keep watch over duties for him and the entire community before the tent of meeting while performing the service of the tabernacle. So what God is doing here, those Levites, they are not priests. Remember that every priest is a Levite, but not every Levite is a priest. Because if you're not a son, a descendant of Aaron, you cannot be a priest. So within the tribe of Levi, you have the Levites, and within the Levites, you have priests, the ones that are descendants of Aaron. So those that are not priests, and of course here now it's easy, it's only three of them, it's Aaron and his two sons. But later on, as they grow and get bigger, the families, we know that there were a whole bunch more priests than what they have now. So those that were not priests are to be the assistants to the priest. They are to help them take care of other things that the priests are not doing. Verse 7, they are to keep watch over duties for him, the entire community, before the tent of meeting while performing the service of the tabernacle. Verse 8, they are to tend to all the implements of the tent of meeting and the service of the children of Israel while performing the service of the tabernacle. You are to give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. Out of the children of Israel, they are dedicated entirely to him. So all the Levites are dedicated to serve the priesthood. You are to appoint Aaron and his sons to maintain the priesthood. Any commoner, again, anyone that is not a Levite, and anyone that is not a priest who approaches must be executed. I mean, with God, you just can't, this is business. He says you cannot approach if you're not a priest or you're not a Levite. There's limits, there's restrictions. Why? Because the more responsibility that God gives you, the more restrictions and limitations. You just can't do whatever you want. It's like, for example, right now, the President of the United States, he's basically a reflection of the whole nation. He just can't go out there and do anything he wants. I mean, the poor guy says anything and everybody's, it's like Israel. Israel is a problem for everybody. Israel is, they always say they're the ones that caused the coronavirus. They're the ones that caused a war. They're the ones that caused all, everything bad thing that happens in the world, they accuse Israel. So again, the priesthood, the higher the responsibility that God gives to us and to his people, the more limitations and restrictions. You just can't go about doing your own thing. Verse 11, then Adonai said to Moses, saying, see, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel in place of the firstborn who opened the womb among the children of Israel. The Levites will be mine. So what does that mean? There's the law of the firstborn. Anyone that opens the womb, any first child that comes from a woman, the first child is the firstborn, whether it's a female or a male. Okay, but if it's a male and it's not a Levite, that male has to be redeemed or rescued, and we're going to go to see what that means. Why every firstborn belongs to God? Because that is the first fruit that comes out of that woman, out of that marriage, out of that relationship. And remember that all first fruits are given to God. Even Yeshua, when he was born, uh, he was taken and presented at the temple as the firstborn. Okay, and because he's not a Levite, that meant that Miriam and her husband Joseph had to present an offering of 5 shekels. Because, and the issue is, it used to be in the ancient Near East, any firstborn male would be seen like a priest or would be seen like the spiritual leader of the home. If you remember the older times, especially Italian families, usually the firstborn son became what? A priest. Why? Because that's where they get this from, the firstborn being the spiritual leader of the home. So usually if you met any families in New York, they were Italiano, I mean, very, very, very Italiano. The firstborn son was usually a priest. You even see that in, what's this movie with John Travolta? Saturday Night Live. His brother was the firstborn, and he was a priest, you know. So that was a big thing, to be a priest in the family. So it used to be that the firstborn son in the ancient Middle East, in the ancient Near East, would be the spiritual leader, would be like a priest. But after the incident of the golden calf, remember the golden calf when Moses was on the mountain and they couldn't wait for him? When Moses came down, the only tribe that did not participate in that idolatry were the Levites. And so God said, now because of that, I'm going to reward you with being my ministers, being my servants, okay, and being my priest. So now it's not the responsibility of all the other firstborns. He took the Levites to do that function. So that is why basically the Levites are replacing that function of the firstborn son. Okay, and we'll see how that goes. It says, I lost my place. Where was I? 13. Thank you. Because all the firstborn are mine. In the day when I was striking down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I consecrated to myself every firstborn in Israel. Whether man or animal, as mine, I am Adonai. So because all these firstborn from Egypt perished because of the incident that Pharaoh didn't want to let them go, God decides now all firstborn are mine. Verse 14, Adonai spoke in the Sinai wilderness to Moses, saying, count the sons of Levi according to their ancestral house by their families, every male a month old and upward, you are to number them. So different from the census of the men for military service, the Levites are going to be counted as soon as they are a month old, 30 days. Why? Because usually if a newborn is not going to survive, they die within 30 days. So they're giving them up to 30 days to see if they don't die, if they live. If they live, then they're counted. Verse 16, so Moses numbered them in accordance with the word of Adonai, just as he was commanded. These were the sons of Levi by their names, Gershon, Kohat, and Merari. So again, the Levites are the ones that are around the tabernacle. And the three sons of Levi, the tribe of Levi, are Gershon, Kohat, and Merari. So they also are going to have a specific position around the tabernacle. To Gershon, he's going to be on the west side. Gershon is going to be on the west side. So here we have, let me put this in another color. So Gershon is going to be on the west with the camp of Ephraim. And he had a total of 8,600. No, I'm sorry, 7,500. So he has 7,500 Levites. Then we have that is telling them their function, what's going to be their function. Their duties, verse 25, the duties of the sons of Gershon in the tent of meeting were the tabernacle, the tent, its coverings, the curtain of the entrance of the tent of meeting, the curtains of the courtyard, the screen of the entrance of the courtyard around the tabernacle and altar, its robes, and all related to its use. In other words, anything that was covering the tabernacle per se, anything that was veils, curtain, things like that. That was the function that that's what they were going to carry. To Kohath, Kohath was going to go to the south. He had 8,600 Levites. So we have Kohath going to be on the south with the camp of Reuben. Kohath here. And he has 8,600 Levites. And their duties were caring for the sanctuary. Verse 29, the Kohathite families were to camp along the side of the tabernacle on the south. They were responsible, verse 31, they were responsible for the ark, the table, the menorah, the altars, and the implements of the sanctuary used in service with them, the curtain, and all involved with its use. In other words, they were to carry the most holy furniture of the tabernacle, the most holy things, the ark, the menorah, the table of bread, showbread, the altars, the altar of incense, the altar that was outside. I mean, these were the most holiest things. So that was their responsibility. Then verse 32 says, the chief prince of the Levites was Eleazar, son of Aaron the Cohen, the priest, appointed over those whose responsibility was the care of the sanctuary. So Eleazar was responsible for Kohath, for all the Levites that were taking care of all the holy things of the sanctuary. Then we have Merari. Merari had 6,200 men, and they were to camp on the north. So they go with Dan, with the camp of Dan. So here we have Merari. And Merari had 6,200 men. Okay. So we have the camp of Judah to the east, Reuben to the south with Kohath and all the families of Kohath. To the west, we have Ephraim and Gershon. And to the north, we have Dan and Merari. The sons of Merari, verse 36, were appointed over the care of the frames of the tabernacle, its crossbars, posts, bases, and all equipment for its use, the posts of the surrounding courtyard, their bases, pegs, and ropes. In other words, they were responsible for kind of like the skeleton, anything that kept the tabernacle standing, all the wood and all the beams and all those things. Those camping in front of the tent of the meeting on the east toward the sunrise were Moses, Aaron, and his sons. They were to care for the sanctuary on behalf of the children of Israel. But anyone unauthorized, again, anyone that is not a priest, anyone that is not a Levite, who approached had to be executed. So on the east, remember that the east side is the entrance into the sanctuary. So on the east side, we have Moses, Aaron, and his sons. So what's happening, these are the guard posts, basically the guards of the tabernacle, all the Levites surrounding. Why? Because they, like I was saying, they serve as a buffer between the tribes and the tabernacle. Why? Because if they don't have the proper purity, if they don't have the proper holiness, they cannot approach the tabernacle. Because how many times that God says they will be what? Executed. Because you could only go in with authority. For example, if you were bringing an offering, and even then, the people could not go inside the tabernacle itself, the courtyard. It had to be always the Levites and the priest. Okay. And then in the temple, there's even going to be even more restrictions because of the size and all the things they have around the temple. So, verse 39 of chapter 3, all the Levites counted by Moses and Aaron at the word of Adonai by their families, inclusive of every male 1 month old and upward, were 22,000. So firstborns of Levites is 22,000. 3 months, a month and older. Okay, so the babies. Verse 40. Adonai said to Moses, count every firstborn male of the children of Israel from 1 month old and upward, and make a list of their names. So now God is asking, remember they already counted the firstborn of the Levites. Now he's saying, I want you to count all the firstborn of all the tribes. Okay. And he says, verse 41, set the Levites apart for me in place of all the firstborn of the children of Israel. So in other words, every firstborn Levite is going to represent a firstborn of all the other tribes. Because remember that it used to be that the firstborn of any tribe will be doing the function that now that the Levites are doing, which is basically spiritual leaders, the one that were the intercessors between God and their families. It was like the Italian priest, okay? So he said, but set the Levites apart for me in place of all the firstborn of children in Israel, and all the livestock of the Levites in place of the firstborn of the livestock of every children of Israel. In other words, even in animals, the firstborn of an animal belongs to God. Okay, instead of staying with the family. If I have a cow and this cow has a baby calf, the first one, after 8 days, I have to bring it to the temple. That belongs to God. Why? Because it's the first fruit of that animal. Remember that every first fruit belongs to God. Even the first fruit of the trees, of any produce, of children, of animals. The first thing is always God's. Why? Because that is his blessing to the people. And it says, all the livestock of the Levites in place of the firstborn of the livestock of children of Israel, I am Adonai. In other words, no ifs or buts or questions, because I am Adonai. I am God. So Moses counted all the firstborn of the children of Israel as Adonai commanded him. The sum total of the firstborn males of the children of Israel, 1 month old and upward, listed by name, was 22,273. So what's the difference? 273. So there were 22,000 Levites, firstborn, 30 days or more, a month older and older. But of all the firstborns of all the tribes, there were 22,273. So what happens? There's an extra 273, which meant that there were enough Levites to represent every single firstborn of other tribes, all the way up to 22,000 only. Okay. For example, all of us that are here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and me 6. Nobody's right. And let's say there were 5 Levites. So there will be 1 Levite representing you, representing you, representing you, and each of you except me, because there's only 5 Levites and we're 6 of us. So God says, okay, you don't have a Levite that's in your place representing what you would have done as a firstborn. So now you have to give me an offering. You need to be redeemed or rescued. Since I cannot serve as a Levite, I cannot serve as a priest, even though I'm a firstborn, and there's no Levite to represent me, then I give an offering. That's what's called the redemption of the firstborn. Different with Yeshua. Yeshua, he is the firstborn of God, but he's also a priest, right? Priest of the heavenly temple. But Yeshua is big enough to represent each and every one of us. So with Yeshua, we have no problem. We don't have to give anything. He does it all for us. But in this case, he says, verse 44, again, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, Take the Levites in place of all the firstborn of the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites in the place of their livestock. The Levites will be mine, I am Adonai. To redeem the 273 firstborn of the children of Israel, exceeding the number of the Levites, you are to collect 5 shekels for each. So if there was not a Levite to represent those 273, each one of those 273 had to give 5 shekels. Based on the shekel of the sanctuary, which is 20 gerahs. Give the money for the redemption of the extra ones of the firstborn of them to Aaron and his sons. Hence Moses collected the redemption money for those exceeding the number redeemed by the Levites. From the firstborn of the children of Israel, he collected silver weighing 1,365 shekels in silver. Now you have to remember that during that time there weren't coins. So they basically gave little blobs of silver that had a specific measure. Okay.
So it would be the family of these 273 that would give.
Yeah, the 5 shekels.
5 shekels.
Yeah.
That's right.
Moses gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons, just as Adonai commanded him, in accordance with the mouth of Adonai. Why? Because these firstborn are not Levites. They cannot serve in the tabernacle, because that's the function now of the Levites. Since they're not Levites, there's one representing each one of them except for those 273. So because they don't have a Levite that represents them, they have to give an offering or redemption. It's called a redemption in a way. Even today they do that. The Jews have a ceremony. I now always forget the name, how to say it. Ben Pidyon, I think it's called, where the firstborn son, they do a ceremony, and the baby's redeemed in the sense that they give the 5 shekels. They give this offering, especially if they're not a Levite, or they're not born into a Levitical family or Cohen family. So they give this offering. And I think that if you go to Luke chapter 2, if you have your Bibles, go to Luke chapter 2, verses 22 to 23. Luke 2, verses 22 through and 23. Well, let's start with verse 21 for some context. It says, when 8 days had passed for his Brit Milah, which is circumcision. Hello, Yeshua got circumcised. He's a Jew. He's in covenant. He was named Yeshua. You never name a baby Jew until he's circumcised. The moment he's circumcised, then you have the name. You don't name, before that, no name. Why? Because you have to understand that Jews don't give a random name to their child. They have 7 days to kind of see the personality of that baby, to see what God tells them about that child. So that name that's given is based on that. Because remember that the name is going to represent the destiny of that child. Okay, the purpose and destiny of that child. So he was named Yeshua. Why was he named Yeshua? Because the angel had talked to Joseph and Miriam that his name was going to be Yeshua. Why? Because Yeshua is the noun of the verb Yeshua, which means salvation. That was his destiny, his purpose. He was named Yeshua, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of their purification were fulfilled, remember that every woman that has a child, if it's a male, if it's a boy, at 40 days, she comes and brings an offering of purification. If it's a baby girl, she has to come in at 60 days. According to the Torah of Moses, they brought him to Jerusalem to present to Adonai. In other words, to do the Ben Pidyon, to do the redemption, because Yeshua was not a Levite, nor was he a priest according to descendants of Aaron. Verse 23, as it is written in the Torah of Adonai, every firstborn male that opens the womb shall be called holy to Adonai. So they did what they were doing here with these 273 guys. So not only did she bring her offering for purification, Not only was Yeshua circumcised and given his name, they also redeemed him because he was not a Levite. Okay, isn't that cool? He did all the stuff according to the Torah. So when people say that he did away with the Torah, no way, Jose. So going back to to Numbers, sorry. Chapter 4. Adonai spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, take a census of the sons of Kohath. So now there he's going to the sons of Levi. Remember, he had a census of all the men 20 and older. He had a census of the Levites 30 days old and older. He had a census of all the firstborns of all the tribes. And now he's having a census of the Kohath family. Take a census of the sons of Kohath from among the sons of Levi, by their families and by their ancestral households, everyone from 30 years of age to 50. So now it's 30 to 50 years old. Why? Because the adult Levites are the one that are going to work in the tabernacle. You can't put a 1-month-old work in the tabernacle, can't you? No. So from age 30 to 50, the Levites is the time frame when they work in the tabernacle or in the temple. Verse 4, this is the task of the sons of Kohath in the tent of meeting. The most holy things. They were in charge of the most holy things, all the furniture that was the most holy. Whenever the camp is about to move out, Aaron and his sons are to take down the shielding curtain and to cover the ark of the testimony with it. Then they are to cover this with porpoise hide, then spread over it a cloth of solid blue. Then they are to put its poles in place. So this is going to go giving you instructions on how they did this. Because before they moved anything from the sanctuary per se, which is the holy place and the Holy of Holies, Aaron and his sons had to cover everything. Aaron and his sons had to cover everything, especially the ark. The ark was something that no one could really look at it, just look at it. So I'm assuming that with even looking at because even in Yom Kippur, we're told that when the high priest came in to do the service of Yom Kippur, he had to bring incense so a cloud of smoke would form. That way he didn't have a direct looking into the covenant, to the ark. So I'm assuming, remember there was a curtain that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. So I'm assuming they let go of the curtain and threw it over the ark. Once that was covered, then they started doing everything else. And the thing is that God had a specific order how you did this. You threw the veil on the ark. You put a hide. There was some sort of a cloth or a skin, leather that they put over it. Then you're going to put a blue covering over it, and then you're going to put the pole. So God is saying, this is how you're going to do it, and this is in this order. So Aaron and his sons had to do that for every single piece inside the sanctuary. And if you read, it goes through every furniture. First starts with the ark. Then it goes to the table of the showbread. Then it goes into the menorah. Then it goes into the altar of incense. And then in verse 13, it says they are to remove the ashes from the altar, then spread over it a purple cloth. So this is the altar that's outside, which was used for the offering. So any ashes that were there, they had to remove the ashes and then cover that altar that was outside in the courtyard. But this one, instead of having a blue cloth, it has a purple cloth with all its utensils and all these things. Verse 15. When Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all its holy implements, and when the camp is ready to move out, after this, the sons of Kohath may come to do the carrying, but they must not touch the holy items or they will die. Why? Because the Levites don't have the same grade of holiness as the priest. And you have to remember that what's inside the holy place and the Holy of Holies are the most holy things of God. It's like if you had furniture in your home that's very valuable to you. It might not be valuable in terms of money. It could be something sentimental. Let's say your mom's China or something, and you're going to move. Are you going to let anybody that has no care for that to pack it and put it in place, or are you going to do that? I would do that. Nice. I do that with my books. Nobody touches my books. I put my books in order and they go in their boxes, and after I got them all set up, then you can take them. Of course, it takes a whole bunch of people to move them, but what I'm saying, what's precious to you, so to God, this is the most holiest of things. Remember, the ark is his throne. So he's saying, nobody touches this or looks at it until you guys cover it and make sure that they can't look at it, they can't touch it. You have to use a pole to carry everything, but they can't touch it directly. Remember the story of the guy when they were bringing the ark from the Philistines to Jerusalem? David, he was dancing and all this stuff, and the ark was on a what you call it? It was being carried in a cart, and it kind of stumbled, and the guy thought it was going to fall, and when he touched it, what happened? It got zapped, and that was it. Why? Again, because of the grade of holiness. So God has his instructions, and they have to be followed. So verse 16. Eleazar, son of Aaron, the Cohen, will have charge of the oil for the light, the fragrant incense, the regular grain offering, and the anointing oil. He is to have charge of the tabernacle and all that is in it, including its holy items and all its implements. Because remember, the Eleazar is the one watching that the sons of Kohat, all the families Kohat, these guys do what they're supposed to do in the order and everything the way God prescribed. Verse 17. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, you are not to let the families of the tribe of the Kohathites be cut off from among the Levites. In other words, die. Do this for them so that they may live and not die whenever they approach the most holy items. Aaron and his sons are to go into the sanctuary and assign each man his job and his responsibility. But the Kohathites are not to go in to look at what is holy, not even momentarily, or they will die. In other words, he's telling Aaron and Eleazar, you do your part, cover everything, make sure everything is, they can't see anything, they can't touch anything. Once all that is done, then you assign, because if Kohat has 8,600 men, not all 8,600 are going to come in and take the furnishings. So he has to assign them. He said, okay, this group of 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 Kohathites, today we're moving, you're in charge of bringing these things out once we have it covered and we have it ready, and you're going to carry it. Maybe in the next time we move out, then another group of 5 or 10 of them will do that, and so forth. The same thing in the temple. That's why there were groups of Levites and priests, which meant that a certain family within the Levites, for example, remember Asaph? They were usually singers. Most of them were singers. And so if there were a whole bunch of them, not all of them came and sang all at the same time during a weekly service in the temple. They were assigned, okay, this family of 10, let's say, or 13, this week is for you. Next week will be another 13. The following week will be another 13. But when there was a high feast, there was a festival, because so many people came and so many offerings were done, then everybody had to be called in to work. Okay? But while there was nothing going on big in the temple or in the tabernacle, they divided these families, because imagine, Gershom had 7,500, Merari 6,200, Kohat 8,600. You can't have all these people all trying to get into the tabernacle and do their job. You have to divide them in groups, divisions. It's called divisions of the Levites, so that every group knew when they would come. They were given a schedule. Okay, your schedule is, okay, for the month of March, you have 1 week, and then the month of September, you have another week, and so forth. So basically, these groups maybe worked, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times a year. Unless there was a festival, then everybody had to come in. Okay? So what God is telling Aaron and Eleazar, his sons, he said, you do your part and make sure these guys, when they come in to take out the holy things, they can't touch them and they can't see them. Because if you do something wrong and they touch something or they look at something, they're going to die on the spot. So their lives is in your hands. You make sure you do their part and then make sure they do their part. Okay, because of the sanctity. And not only that, it's because God said so. You can't argue with God. He says that's the way you do it and that's the way you do it. So again, what's the purpose of all this? To show order. Because imagine if you have all these 8,600 guys come in and there's only 6 furnitures to move out, what's going to happen? Chaos. No, I want to do it. No, I want to do it. No, you did it yesterday. No, I want to. What? There's always has to be order. There always has to be someone supervising and telling how to do things. To avoid what? The main thing was to avoid death because of encroachment. If you went beyond your duties, beyond your functions, beyond your responsibility, that's encroachment. And that's one of the Torah portions we're going to be reading in a few weeks with Korah. Korah was a Kohathite. He was the one that was carrying the holiest of holiest things. But no, he wanted to be the high priest. Encroachment. And what happened with his encroachment? Bzz, he got zapped. And the problem is that it was not only him, it was him and all his family, all his belongings, everything. Because if you have a position like the Levites or the priest, when God gives you a high position within his kingdom and you do something wrong, not only do you pay for it, your whole family pays for it. Your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren, all the way to the 4th generation, unless there is repentance. Okay, I mean, that's huge. Exactly. That very first sinkhole, huge sinkhole. Okay, so we're going to take time for some questions or comments.